So a really common belief I hear is if I eat when I'm hungry and stop when I'm full, I'm not restricting. And honestly, that makes a lot of sense. That message is everywhere. It's often taught as the definition of intuitive eating. So of course people assume if I'm honoring my hunger and fullness, I must be doing this right. And there's no shame here. Most people are doing the best they can with the information that they've been given. But here's the reframe that matters. Hunger and fullness alone do not equal freedom from restriction. In fact, focusing only on hunger and fullness can sometimes mask restriction rather than resolve it. Because you can be eating in response to hunger and stopping at fullness while still operating from rules, conditions, fear, or control. So hunger fullness cues don't tell the whole story. And that's what we're going to dive in today. We're going to dive in and talk about how to spot restriction in all its sneaky forms, how to gain freedom from restriction, and how getting fully rid of restriction gives you confidence and trust with food in your body. So why does this matter? So often I see intuitive eating become this hunger fullness diet, just another diet based on rules and based on shame. And full recovery from disordered eating and body shame means building that internal compass that guides you. Because if it comes from rules, restriction, shame, and distrust and external, it can keep us very stuck and miserable. We have to find that internal compass. By the way, if you're curious what I mean by internal compass, I have a video for you, so check it out in the show notes to learn more about what I mean. So anyways, back to restriction and when restriction goes unnoticed. So when it goes unnoticed, it tends to keep running the show, and we don't want that. So today, here's my promise for this episode. What we're going to do instead is zoom out just a little. And by the end of this, you'll be able to spot restriction in real time, not just in hindsight. You'll recognize it even when calories are adequate. And you'll know what to do instead when restriction shows up without swinging to chaos or forcing yourself to just eat intuitively when that's not where you're at right now. So this isn't about eating perfectly. It's about learning how to notice what's driving the eating or what's driving not eating and gently shifting that, raising more awareness so we can create some change. So first thing I want to do is I want to define restriction. Let's talk about what restriction actually is, because it's way broader than what most people think. Restriction isn't just skipping meals or eating less food. At its core, restriction is anything that limits access to nourishment, satisfaction, or permission around food. That can look like rules, delays, conditions, and mental negotiations. So rules may be I can only eat this at certain times, or I can't have carbs unless I do X workout, or this food is only allowed on this day. Delays may look like eating later so you feel more in control, or to earn more food, or to not go over calories at the end of the day, or to reduce guilt. Even if you feel like you're eating enough, you're still delaying it. Conditions. So that is when food is contingent on behavior, mood, how you feel about your body, productivity, your weight, your worth. Okay, so it's conditional. It also can look like mental negotiation, so constant bargaining, tracking, compensating, justifying, or planning how to fix your eating later. Now, restriction can exist even with adequate calories. This is important to note. You can meet your calorie needs and still be restricting. And this is where people think it's just as easy as honoring hunger and stopping with fullness. So some examples of how it can exist without adequate calories is eating enough, but from a very limited list of safe foods, or eating consistently, but never allowing for satisfaction, pleasure, or flexibility, or eating enough physically while staying really rigid, anxious, or disconnected mentally and still having that constant food noise. Restriction is not just about quantity, it's about permission and freedom. Restriction can really, the intentions behind restriction really matters. So why is it important for us to really assess our intention? It's not just about the physically what you're eating, but the intention behind it. So two people can eat the same meal with very different outcomes. The difference is their intention. Is the drive coming from fear, control, guilt, body manipulation, worth? Or is it coming from attunement, care, flexibility, self-trust, trust with food, honoring your body's needs and wants? When eating is driven by restriction-based intention, the body stays in this threat state, and so does your mind. And hunger and fullness cues stay unreliable because we don't know the intention behind this, so we don't really know how to determine truly our hunger and fullness. And it becomes another diet. Food remains really mentally loud, even if calories are quote-unquote adequate. And the binge-restrict cycle still stays alive. It's very hard to get rid of binging under this mentality. So when our intention starts to shift and we start to raise awareness around this and act accordingly to our grounded, respectful intention, the body can learn that it's safe and regulation improves. Our cravings and our urgency are going to decrease. And that trust, not control, not willpower, is going to become the anchor for us. So really the bottom line is restriction is less about what you eat. It's less about what you eat and more about how and why you eat. Until this intention shifts, the body doesn't experience true nourishment, even if the plate looks like quote unquote enough. So the main problem with just honor hunger and fullness, this is going to change in your recovery process, and this is going to change according to where you're at in your recovery mindset. So you may not be ready for this hunger and fullness cues and being able to truly know what that is, and it's way more complicated than that. So let me explain a little bit more, make it more clear. So in recovery, hunger and fullness cues are going to change over time. And sometimes we need to override them when we need to be renourishing ourselves. There are really phases where you can't rely on them yet because our brain is wired a certain way and we don't have trust yet. And the disordered eating voice can still be manipulating it greatly. Many times when I start working with people, I can start to notice already where they're trying to do intuitive eating and just honor hunger and fullness without doing all these other pieces, and it's not reliable. The disordered eating part is just too loud and too unexplored. There's work to be done, trust to be built. So when you're chronically malnourished and you're chronically not listening to your body and you are shaming the fact that you have hunger or that you shouldn't be this hungry, then we can't trust it. So hunger cues can be muted, delayed, and chaotic, and fullness may show up fast or feel threatening and scary or shameful. And so at this stage, the body really it's going to need consistent nourishment, not negotiation over this hunger fullness. And this often means that eating, even when we're hungry, isn't very obvious, and those subtle hunger cues are not very obvious, or continuing to eat past fullness. So eating past that early fullness to restore energy and trust and stability is going to be hard to do. So this is not when we are taking in more than just the hunger and fullness cues and honoring the other parts of us and the other needs. This is not ignoring your body or disrespecting your body. It's responding to deeper needs that we need to do in order to get to a place where we can understand hunger and fullness and use it as a guide and not as rules. Later in recovery from disordered eating and eating disorder, body image shame, what happens is we can start to build trust. We start building trust after this consistent nourishment. And after consistent nourishment and trust building with these foods, our body's going to feel safer. Our cues are going to become clearer. Hunger and fullness are going to start to be more reliable. And this is when listening to them becomes more useful. And even then, there's still just one input, not the final rule. I'm going to say that again. Even then, they are just one input of things that we need to gather, not the final rule. Establishing and doing the hard work of building trust with food in your body is what allows full freedom, not strictly abiding to rules of hunger and fullness. I'm going to say that again. True recovery means building trust with yourself, food, and your body. It's not just simply following rules. And this isn't easy work. This is the work I do in my program to help folks feel truly at home with their body and where they can let go of the food noise for good. So if you are interested in learning more about that, you can look in the show notes and apply to work together. I'd love to work with you. So yes, back to it. So let's talk about how the disordered eating voice can really justify restriction and justify this rules-based hunger fullness scale. How many times have you said, I'm not hungry, so I shouldn't eat? Or I feel full, so stopping is the healthy choice. Or I'll wait until hunger is clearer to make sure I know I'm hungry. Or I'm honoring my body by not pushing it, by not eating more. Now it sounds calm, but it can still very much lead to undernourishment, and I see it all the time lead to undernourishment if people are doing this too quickly and haven't explored true trust with food and body and are jumping to intuitive eating too quickly. This really keeps people stuck because then the body never gets consistency and adequacy to recalibrate those cues once and for all. And we haven't built trust in all those situations with food. Hunger stays unreliable. Fullness stays loaded with fear, and food remains mentally loud. So I want to reframe this. I want you to take this away. Sometimes recovery means overriding cues to nourish. Sometimes it means listening to cues with flexibility. And always it means checking. Is this my body or my disordered eating voice interpreting this signal? So let's dive deeper now into the different forms of restriction. This is really a core educational piece of this video, and I want you to pay close attention and think about what comes up for you. What restriction lingers in your world right now. So we know what to assess and tackle in order to get you to full recovery and let go of restriction fully. So the types of restriction, we have behavioral restriction, conditional restriction, mental restriction, emotional situation restriction, and other restriction I'm going to talk about too. So behavioral restriction, that's skipping, delaying, or shrinking portions. It's eating safe foods to avoid desire, only eating at approved times. Conditional restriction is, I can eat this if, or earning foods through exercise or productivity or what the scale says. It's needing permission from someone else, the scale, an app, your hunger level, a plan. It's mental restriction, which is labeling foods as bad or too much or not worth it. So that's going to be the mental shaming, mental spiraling. So when you're eating a cupcake and you're allowing yourself the cupcake, but you're shaming yourself internally for having it, and you're saying, well, now, you can't have a cupcake for another week, you are still restricting. Even though you're physically eating that cupcake, you are mentally restricting. So mental restriction, labeling foods as good or bad, having morality, planning future compensation, thinking about food constantly while you're eating it, but you're just hyper-focused on analyzing it. That's all mental restriction. There's lots of different types. And then emotional restriction. So avoiding food when emotions are present, coping with food, restricting during stress, using it as a form of coping. And then the other types of restriction is, I eat intuitively, but there's a caveat. Or I honor my hunger, but I'm not honoring my desires or my emotional desire to connect with someone over this food. I'm only honoring hunger, not this social outing that also, where I want to eat this food, even though I'm not really that hungry. Maybe stopping at fullness, even when you're not really satisfied. You're not really satisfied completely. Avoiding certain foods until you feel like you're at a place with your body that you want to be, or with body image. All different types of sneaky restriction, and I'm going to put it up on the screen here, some different examples. So why does this matter? Why does knowing all the types of restriction matter? Because the same behavior can have completely different effects on the body and the mind depending on the intention driving it, like I explained earlier. If you stop eating when you're comfortably full from a place of trust, attunement, and permission, that pause is going to reinforce body awareness, comfort with your digestion comfort, your emotional comfort, and respect for internal cues and your wishes and according to your values. It's going to support your regulation. It's going to tell your body, I listen, I respond, I trust, food is available again when I need it. But if you're stopping at the first hint of fullness because fullness feels bad or dangerous or out of control or morally wrong, that's no longer attunement. That's fear-based restriction. And the body doesn't respond to behaviors in isolation. It responds to perceived threats and scarcity. So when restriction is driven by rules, conditions, or fear, even subtle ones, the body is going to learn. Fullness equals risk. Eating enough equals unsafe. Hunger cues can't be trusted. Food access is conditional. And over time, this is definitely can heighten food preoccupation and mental noise and make it very confusing around your hunger and fullness cues and increase urgency around food. So binging and the out of control feeling and reinforce that restrict overeat cycle, even when calories again look adequate on paper. And this is why restriction can exist without weight loss, without skipped meals, and without low intake. Restriction lives in the relationship with food, not just the quantity. So when we broaden the definition of restriction, we can stop asking, am I eating enough? And start asking, am I eating with permission, flexibility, and trust, or with rules, fear, and negotiation? That distinction is what determines whether a behavior supports a healthy relationship with food or quietly keeps you stuck. So why does stopping this restriction actually create trust? Because trust comes from giving yourself that consistent permission, building those experiences for yourself, having predictable nourishment, uncoupling our worth from food, having emotional safety around food, learning to trust yourselves. And the complex nature of this and all of the deep work to do around it and how sneaky restriction is why just listening to your body isn't wrong. It's just incomplete. And why recovery requires more layers, not just more discipline. So I want you to try and build your awareness around where restriction is happening so you can understand and start to shift from rules to awareness, from cues to needs, from control to responsiveness. I believe in full recovery for you. It's absolutely possible. You can be free of food noise. I remember when my life was centered around control and restriction, and I wish I had heard what I just told you sooner. You don't have to live this way. You can trust food, your body, and yourself. There's a more compassionate way forward. You can be free, and you can have a way forward where you are friends with your body, you trust your body, you communicate with your body, and where food feels neutral, and where you can let go of that control. And you are worth doing the hard work for. It's possible for you.